My name's Stefan Michalak. I'm the assistant head of R&I, and what wanted to sort of come and do a short presentation to you about today is sort of how you can get involved. So aware that we've probably already got some research active clinicians on the call, or at least I hope we might do. But I think what's more likely is we've got a number of people who are likely to want to do research, but as is often the case in the trust, not always sure how. Don't know who to turn to, don't know what bits go into which box to make everything go forward. So what I've asked colleagues of mine to do today is to come forward and do a short presentation on their respective areas, as I think it's only appropriate as they're the experts. So quickly run through grants and pre-award and what goes into that, patient public involvement and engagement, research sponsorship, research delivery, and hosted research and how that might be different to sponsored research. And then I've got some key contacts at the end, as well as bits throughout the slides, an opportunity for any Q&A.
So I'm Irfan Aslam. I'm a funding development officer in the pre-award grants team. So we're a team of 5. So there's Karen, myself, and Natalie as officers, and then Louise and Fran as the coordinators. So the main thing that we can support with is any sort of research, whatever ideas that you have, kind of anything that involves patients, NUH facilities or staff. We can kind of get you some costings and help you prepare a project all the way up to kind of grant submission. So the main thing I've been in research in NUH for about 3.5 years. So I've helped with kind of consenting patients to research studies, but then also kind of setting up studies that can open at NUH. So I think Sophie and Geeta later on in the presentation will talk more about that. So the main thing that we do is kind of what's your project, what kind of costs are involved, and we'll kind of support you all the way through up until you submit that application. And there's some kind of general information there about kind of attribution of costs and schedule of events. They're kind of general documents that will support you with. And the main thing with that is kind of what cost we're going to attribute, and is it the grant funding that's going to fund that, or if there's other streams that will support your research. There's a lot of national support from the Clinical Research Network from that perspective. And yeah, once you get a meeting with us, we can talk you through a lot of those. So the main thing is just to come to us as soon as you can with an idea. There is a lot of funding calls that we can aim for, depending on, you can go for a £20,000 charity grant up to 4 to 5 million of National Institute for Health and Care research applications. So I wouldn't worry about how small or how big your idea is. There is some funder out there that we can support you with that. And the main thing about kind of clear and full justification just kind of talks about what costs we're putting into the grant, and then also how can we justify it and show value for money, because a lot of the kind of charity calls, it is public money or donations that they've been given. So a lot of the time there is specific guidance that each funder will kind of limit us to either spend so much on some things and not offer funding for other things. But again, when you're in the meeting with myself and our funding development colleagues, will support you with what we can cost in for, and go from there. So this is just kind of a quick outlook of some general costs that we could probably pop in. I think at this point, I'll kind of mention some of our anaesthesia colleagues a few years ago. Nigel Bedforth and David Hewson had a grant awarded for a patient sedation. It was a patient-maintained sedation device, so it was just kind of pressing a button, and the patient can kind of control how much sedation they need during that. I think it was hip or knee replacement surgery. So the idea with that project was, we've got a device that we've got the idea for. How do we get that to the point of being tested in the NHS? So I think in the end that went to an Invention for Innovation Award for about £700,000, and it had colleagues from NUH, University of Nottingham, and Nottingham Trent. So the main thing for the grants is kind of who's your research team, who's around you to support you with delivering that project. And in this case, from NUH, it was our anaesthesia colleagues, the University of Nottingham supported from the kind of patient perspective and the kind of psychology to do with kind of using a device and what patients would think of. So that kind of linked in the questionnaire questions that we asked the patients after they took part in the research. And then Trent University supported us with kind of prototyping a specific device that would be workable in a theatre scenario. That just kind of gives you an idea of kind of what we kind of need for a project. And because it is £700,000, you need multiple kind of collaborators from different areas to show that if you are as an applicant, someone who's delivered research in the past, great, that looks good on your application. But I wouldn't worry if you've never had research or any grants awarded, because the main thing is we'll kind of talk you through, do you need kind of a mentor? Do you need a supervisor who's got that kind of credibility to just add more robustness to your application? And they're general conversations that we'll have with you guys as you're working up a grant. And then this is just kind of a quick kind of outlook of the sooner you can book in an appointment with us, the easier it is to kind of get you in contact with RDS, which is the Research Design Service, and they can support you with kind of what's your project initially, what sort of methodology that you've talked about, and you kind of need that back and forth a couple of times, send a couple of drafts of your ID and your application just to make it as good as possible. We've got all the funding from our side that we pop in, and then we've got that kind of get to that submission stage. And then when it comes to, obviously there's PPI, and Kate will talk about that in a minute. And then any other links, that just depends on what your project is. Do you have a project that's got some sort of drug being used? Do we need to get pharmacy involved? Is there any other support departments that will be involved at an early stage, and what sort of feasibility that we just need to kind of think about from that perspective? But the main thing is kind of, if you have an idea, come to our team. We can link you in with the right people if it is a very early stage idea. And then we can also, at that time, as you're developing your project, can forward you kind of different funding calls, because they're always rolling. There's some that are in March a lot of the time. The NIHR do a lot of calls multiple times a year. But again, there is a lot of charity grants that we could probably apply for as well, if need be. Okay, so this is just our contact details to get in contact with us. Because I've only had 5 minutes, I've just kind of gone through a kind of quick idea of what we support you with. But hopefully this gives you an excuse to get in contact with us, and we can kind of give a more in-depth kind of, have a quick half-an-hour Teams call, discuss what your ideas are, and kind of take you on the next steps of where we would advise you to go. Kind of, is this an idea that's kind of fully developed and we can just apply straight away, or is it something that we'll just kind of give you some advice, go out there, try and get more supervisors, more collaborators, and kind of help to make your grant as strong as possible, ready for a submission. So yeah, the main thing is the email's there, get in contact with us, and we'll support you from there.
Thank you very much, Irfan. I think you sold yourself slightly short there with some of the work that you and your team do. But I think one thing that might have been slightly overlooked is the amount of work that goes into the feasibility, the early level feasibility of a study, and whether or not this might work, and how you can engage in terms of the patient pathway and take it from that perspective. But I'm sure if anyone's interested, they can get in contact with you and explore things further. Thank you. Next we have Kate.
Well, thank you. Very much like everyone speaking today, we're quite limited with our time. So what I intend to do is give you a snapshot of what patient and public involvement is, why it's important, and who to contact, our team and our remit. Of course, if you have any further questions, my contact details will be at the end. So please do not hesitate to contact myself and the team. So yes, as Stefan mentioned, my name's Kate Frost. I'm the head of patient and public involvement and engagement for research and innovation. So yes, I'm just going to cover the remit. So I head up the PPIE team, standing for patient public involvement and engagement, and we have 3 PPIE managers that sit within the team, and we're also aligned to our communications and engagement team, which is especially helpful as there is a lot of overlap in our work. Our remit, so we support researchers across all of NUH, so all divisions as part of research and innovation, and we also support our 2 National Institute for Health and Social Care Research centres. So that is the Nottingham Biomedical Research Centre and our Nottingham Clinical Research Facility. So I'm just going to give you an overall kind of view of what exactly patient and public involvement is. And for some people who may not have heard of this terminology before, there are three kind of prongs to the PPIE remit. The one that most people tend to be familiar with is participation, and that is where people are being recruited into a clinical trial, testing new either treatment pathways, medicines, and things like that. So that may be where most people are familiar with, and that is a key element of what we do within our team. But specifically, we do focus on involvement and engagement. So these two prongs, and I'll go on to speak a little bit more about what they are exactly. But in a nutshell, involvement is key to what we do. You've heard Irfan mention this. Is no time is too early to start doing patient involvement and speaking to your patient population at concept and building research priorities together. And we do this not just at pre-grant application, but we do support patient and public involvement and embed this within your research program for the life cycle of that program. Engagement, on the other hand, is not so much doing research with our patient populations, but that is about engaging and information sharing and disseminating results that make these accessible to the patient population as well. So I'll just go into a little bit more detail with the time I've got about these areas. So what is patient and public involvement in research? So as you can see here on the right, this is kind of a visual of the research lifecycle. Patient and public involvement is embedded at NUH in every single part of this. So you can see identifying the research question. We want to make sure that rather than clinicians, researchers, practitioners coming up with research ideas in a vacuum, that this is being done with our patients and the public to really ascertain what means the most to them and what are their priorities. They do support in many different ways and many different levels, writing our funding applications, designing the research study and going through the approval processes. Most recently, we do have patient and public contributors co-delivering research studies, and this is increasingly being planned at grant application stage. So they are actually now carrying out the research with our research volunteer initiative acting as the vehicle to do this. So they are now in the trust, supporting patients, having patient-to-patient conversations, and guiding patients through that research journey. Continually, they also support analysing results and also in the dissemination, which is a key element as well of involvement. So co-designing how we are ensuring that the results of research are accessible to that patient population and then embedded in clinical practice. So that in a nutshell is involvement. So yes, also engagement. So again, as I mentioned, this is more about information sharing and trying to almost demystify what research is. The pandemic has certainly been a catalyst for putting clinical research on the map of the general for the general public, but we are now, restrictions have lifted at the trust in regards to COVID, and we have a lot of exciting initiatives that are planned. So one of them being our mobile research unit or research bus that we will be taking out into communities to not only deliver research outside of the four walls of the hospital, but also to engage and infuse and inspire our communities and ensure that we are trying to access and get involved our more underserved communities. We also are opening the doors again, so we're having open days, tours of our clinical research facilities, and we also have a number of other engagement projects and programs, including the Clinical Research Podcast. So that's a series of podcasts speaking about research and certain programs of interest. And we also have our Research Lounge, which is a virtual event occurs every month where we invite patients and the publics to come along and have conversations which have been submitted by themselves around topics of their interest. So as I've mentioned, participation is a key element, an increasing key element of what we do within the team. And we do need to ensure not only that the research is planned with our patient and public members, but also that once it has commenced and we're delivering it, that our participants are having a good experience, because this is key to the success of the research delivery and ultimately our outcomes for that research. So we are part of a national programme which is led by the NIHR and one of their spokes, the Clinical Research Network, and we are embedding at the moment the Participant in Research Experience Survey, and our aim is to ensure that every participant at NUH has the opportunity to give that feedback and that we are actively acting upon those feedback to improve our service. Also, a key part of this that I did want to mention is increasingly we need to focus on equality, diversity and inclusivity of our patient samples. So when we're recruiting into studies, we need to make sure that it is representative, fully representative of that patient population. So we are focusing on this, and we are developing a equality, diversity and inclusivity strategy, which will focus on how we can ensure that our research is accessible and inclusive, both for involvement but also participation. That is, in a nutshell, what we do in our PPIE team. I would really encourage anyone who would like to read more to visit our staff area of the NUH website, or contact myself via the email there, and we can either set up a meeting or I can direct you to further resources. I do want to say that patient and public involvement is increasingly becoming mandatory, both locally and nationally. So any funding body you apply for, which IRF has touched on, so whether that be through the National Institute for Health Research or charities or other huge funders, large funders nationally, they will be making it a mandatory requirement now to have this as embedded part of your research project from concept through to dissemination. So it's never too early to start. If you have an idea, then you know where we are now. Please do come to us, and we'll be more than happy to support yourself and your research idea.
Thank you, Kate. And yeah, I think you've already touched on it. We're now in a position where we are very unlikely to see funding awards granted if we haven't got any PPIE involved in the application. So it's a move from where it might have been in the past to very much a patient-centric research outlook at the moment, which is fantastic. Thank you.
So I'm Sophie, and I'm one of 4 senior research governance facilitators, and I'm going to give you a very quick whistle-stop tour through our role as a research sponsor and how that ties in with governance and ethics. So first of all, we're going to look at what to do if you've got an idea for some research. So the first thing to do is to determine whether or not your project is research. And a key definition is that research attempts to derive generalizable new knowledge. And like it says on the screen, that isn't to be confused with service evaluation and audit. There is a really useful tool on the HRA website, which is linked here, which can be used to help you determine whether or not your project classes as research. And we're also more than happy to help and advise on that. So you've completed the tool, you've had a chat with us, and we've determined that, yep, your project is research. So the next thing to do is to identify who you want to sponsor your study, and also to identify any support staff that you might need to help you deliver the study. Also think about securing any funding. So obviously we've heard from Irfan today, so it's really great to get in touch with the grants team to help with that. And then we need to complete the study documents, including the protocol. So just a key thing to note is that in order for NUH to sponsor studies, we do require the chief investigator to have a substantial or honorary contract with NUH. And that's just to make sure that we've got indemnity and things like that in place. So there are a series of documents that you'll need for your project. So you will always need a protocol and an IRAS form. And then quite often you'll also need things like participant information sheets and informed consent forms. And it's important to note that they should be age appropriate, and you may also need documents for relatives or parents if a participant's unable to provide consent for themselves. You might also want to think about posters and advertisements, questionnaires, case report forms. For devices, we often need technical specifications, and for drugs trials, we often need either investigator brochures or summary of product characteristics. And we also need a research CV for the chief investigator. And with these documents, it's really great to get the PPIE team involved and to get some patient and public involvement and engagement in designing these documents and making sure that they are accessible to the future participants. We do have templates for most of the documents, and they're all available on the Trust website, and they can be accessed at that website linked on the slide. So a quick kind of overview of the overall process. So once you've got your documentation ready, you'll send those through to the appropriate governance team. So for NUH, that's us at Research Sponsor, and we'll then conduct our sponsorship review. And I'll touch on that a little bit more in a moment. Once we're happy with the documents and we're happy with the study, we will give you the authorization to submit that for regulatory approvals. The two main approvals are the HRA, which is the Health Research Authority, and the REC, which is the Research Ethics Committee. But you may also need MHRA, which is the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, particularly for device and drug trials. And you may also need things like CAG, which is the Confidentiality Advisory Group. But again, as we review the documents, we can help advise on what approvals you need. Once you've got all of your approvals, you'll then need confirmation of capacity and capability approval from the R&I department, and then you can get going on your study. There is a link there as well that just details further information about what different approvals and decisions there are and what you might need for your project. So our sponsorship review essentially makes sure that the study is compliant with the appropriate governance. So we check that it's compliant with a broad range of regulations, principles and standards of good practice, and also the UK policy framework for health and social care research. And there's a link there to that policy. And overall, research governance is really important because it aims to safeguard the participants in research, it aims to protect the researcher and investigators, and also to enhance the ethical and scientific quality of the research. So a quick touch on ethics. So there's different types of ethical approval. The main one that we focus on is the NHS REC. Studies don't always need ethics, and a really good tool to help you determine whether or not you need ethical review is the REC decision tool, which is linked on the screen. We can also help advise on that as well. And HRA approval. So this brings together the assessment of governance, legal compliance and the independent ethical opinion, and it's needed for all research involving the NHS, patients and staff. So that was a very quick kind of whistle-stop tour. So just a few things to note. So you can't conduct research within the NHS unless all regulatory approvals and capacity and capability are in place. We do also ask that, as well as our sponsored studies, where we're not the sponsor but we are the lead site, we do request that we are sent a copy of those documents just for a very quick check over before they get submitted, just so we can make sure that everything is compliant with the appropriate requirements for NHS research. And finally, if you've got any questions or require any advice at all, please don't hesitate to contact us at Research Sponsor and we'll be more than happy to help. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sophie. I think it's also worth just noting that sponsorship's often seen as sort of one of the most daunting processes around research. So obviously there's a huge amount that goes into it, but for anyone who is looking to take part or take on their own studies and get those moving, the team we've got are fantastic. They're more than happy to help. Doesn't matter what your experience is, more than happy to hold hands through it and guide you through every step of the process where needed. So thank you very much.
So my name is Celia. I am the Clinical Research Manager for DREAM. So DREAM is a Department of Research and Education in Emergency Medicine, Acute Medicine and Major Trauma. As a research team, we are a team of about 10, so it consists of 2 research managers, there are research nurses, research practitioners, we've got a data clerk and we've also got an admin as well. We cover the emergency department, we cover critical care, we cover anaesthetics, some parts of anaesthetics and paediatrics as well. And our role is basically to, as it says on the title, deliver research. So what that involves, we get involved right at the beginning. So we get expressions of interest. So either from the R&I team, or if we go to a conference, we get told about studies that may be useful for us. Sorry, Stefan, I'll speed it up. So basically we recruit patients, so we can send patients to studies if that's in the protocol. We also complete the intervention, so maybe it's a drug that they need, or they need questionnaires completing, or they get given a device, for example, and we can do all of that for you. We also do the follow-up of the patients as well. So a lot of studies, they are followed up for quite a long period of time. So we make sure that we contact them when their follow-ups need doing, and also make sure that the patients are kept up to date with all that's going on as well. Every study that we have has a study lead, so that would either be one of the nurses or the research practitioners. So if you're the lead for a study, you will be liaising with them, but all of our team work on every study, so feel free to contact all of us. We are based in Broome, so for those who don't know, it's 8th floor West Block. We're the last office on the right, so if there's anything you need, please feel free to come and talk to us. As I said, we've got about 30 or so trials that are either in setup or currently running, so it does keep us very busy. But if you've got an idea or just want to talk to us about a study that you might want to run, feel free to come down to Dream. I'll try and get my email is cecilia.peters. There are no other letters or numbers or anything, so feel free to email me and we'll try to accommodate you where we can. It might be the case that it might fall under a different research team, but if that's the case, then I will let you know. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Sorry, Celia, apologies for rushing you, aware of the time. Thank you, Celia.
So I'm Gita, I'm a Divisional Portfolio Manager for Surgery and Clinical Support, and basically we have a team that work to set up hosted research, so it can be quite daunting to come up with your own ideas or to apply for funding. So if you wanted to take part in research where somebody else has already put that work in, NUH can become a hosted site, and within the team there are site setup facilitators who will literally work with you throughout every step to open that study for you. So we work through expressions of interest. So sometimes we might reach out to you and say, you're interested in this research, would you like to become the principal investigator at the trust? And if you want to take part in that study, we'll fill in all the forms, send it back to the sponsor, and we ensure that we've got all the right documents, that it's got all the right ethics and the approvals. We'll contact all the support departments and we'll identify support. So as Celia's just said, her team might be able to support you, or if you needed a data clerk or admin, we'll identify people to support you, work out who's carrying out what in the research, and then we'll come to any meetings with the sponsor. We can negotiate with the sponsor if you don't think something's feasible at the trust, or if you require a piece of equipment, we can negotiate with the sponsor to try and get that into the trust for you. And from your signatures, your CVs, from your GCPs, everything, we'll collate all of that information, provide it to the sponsor to get the study open. And then once the study is green lighted, I'll be in touch with you just to check performance on a periodic basis, just to make sure the study is working. If for any reason the study isn't working, again, we can go back to the sponsor or negotiate what needs to happen, or if you require more support. So that is what the hosted team do.
That's fantastic. I think, between both your team and Celia's team, I think it's often missed the work that goes into ensuring that studies are able to open and run effectively. And the things that go on behind the scenes. So again, like with all the other bits, the earlier you contact us, the better. And the more we can do, the more more than happy to help. So it's a thank you for listening, and any questions? Some contact.